The Faithful Tale, Chapter 1, A Dream of a Soul. Far out in the open sea, where the water is as blue as the petals of the brightest cornflowers and as clear as crystal, lies the kingdom of the Sea King. His palace was built of shimmering coral and seashells, and in its gardens grew strange plants that swayed gently with the slightest movement of the water. The Sea King was a widower, and so his old mother kept house for him, a wise and proud mermaid who wore 12 oysters on her tail as a sign of her high rank. The king himself had 6 daughters, all of them beautiful princesses, but the youngest was the most special of all. Her skin was as clear and delicate as a rose petal, and her eyes were as blue as the deepest lake. But, like all other mermaids, she had no feet. Her body ended in a fish's tail, which shimmered with all the shades of silver and azure. More than anything in the world, the Little Mermaid loved to hear stories about the world above, the world of human beings. Her old grandmother would often say, "Humans do not live as long as we do. We can live for 300 years, but when our time is over, we simply become foam upon the water. We do not even have graves among those we loved. Humans, however, have something we do not, an immortal soul which lives on forever, flying up into the sky towards the shining stars." These words about an immortal soul sank deep into the Little Mermaid's heart. She tended to her small garden, in the center of which stood a marble statue of a handsome boy, which had once fallen from a sunken ship. She would gaze at the statue and think of the world where humans lived with their eternal souls, and her heart ached with longing. According to custom, when a mermaid turned 15, she was allowed to rise to the surface for the first time to see the world above the water. The Little Mermaid waited for her birthday with great anticipation, dreaming not so much of ships and cities, but of coming closer, just for a moment, to a world where there was something more than 300 years of life in the cold depths of the sea. Chapter 2, The Shipwreck. And so, the day arrived. 15 years old, she no longer had to listen to the stories of others. As the evening twilight began to fall upon the water, the Little Mermaid bid her family farewell. "Be careful," her grandmother told her, placing a wreath of white lilies on her head. She rose through the water as lightly and smoothly as a bubble of air, and then her head broke the surface. What a sight it was! The sun had just set, but the clouds still glowed with gold and crimson, and in the soft pink sky, the evening star was already beginning to shine. The air was soft and fresh, and the sea was as calm as a mirror. Not far from her, a large 3-masted ship rested on the still water. From its deck came the sound of music and laughter. She swam closer and looked through one of the cabin windows. It was as bright as day inside, and she saw hundreds of finely dressed people. But the most handsome of all was a young prince with large, dark eyes and a kind smile. It was his 16th birthday, and this celebration was in his honor. When he came out onto the deck, hundreds of fireworks shot into the sky, and for a moment, the night became brighter than day. Frightened, the Little Mermaid dived beneath the water, but she came up again at once, and it seemed as if all the stars of heaven were falling down upon her. But the celebration did not last long. The sky turned black, a sinister ripple ran across the water, and then a hurricane wind arose. Giant black waves rose up like mountains, tossing the ship from side to side. With a terrible crack, the masts broke, and the ship, turning on its side, began to sink rapidly into the deep. In the darkness that followed, The Little Mermaid could see the people struggling for their lives, but the waves were merciless. Suddenly, she saw the prince disappear beneath the water. Her heart seized with terror. She remembered that humans could not breathe in her element. Forgetting her own danger, she plunged in to help him, navigating through the wreckage and floating timbers. At last, she found him, already nearly exhausted. She caught him, lifted his head above the water, and let the waves carry them along together. All through the night, she swam with him, keeping him from drowning. Only by morning did the storm subside. The sky cleared, and the Little Mermaid saw the shore. Nearby stood a tall white temple surrounded by orange and lemon groves. With her last strength, she swam to a small cove and gently laid the prince on the warm sand, with his head raised. Then she kissed his forehead and waited for him to awaken. Soon, several young maidens came out of the temple. Seeing them, the Little Mermaid swam further away and hid behind some tall rocks, watching. One of the girls found the prince, and together they revived him. He awoke and smiled at everyone around him, but not at her. He did not even know that she existed. With a heart full of unspeakable sorrow, the Little Mermaid dived into the deep water and returned to her father's palace. Chapter 3: The Bargain with the Witch. Now she became even more silent and thoughtful. If before she had dreamed of the human world in general, now all her thoughts were of the prince alone. She told her sisters of her adventure, and with their help, she learned where the prince's palace was located. From then on, the Little Mermaid would swim to the shore every evening. She would sit in the water for hours, gazing at the tall castle where the lights shone. She saw the prince walking in the garden, heard snippets of conversation and music, but did not dare to approach. Her longing grew deeper. She understood that the only way to be with him was to become human, and the love of a human, as her grandmother had said, could grant her an immortal soul. Finally, desperation gave her the courage for a terrible step. She decided to go to the Sea Witch. Everyone in the ocean feared her and tried to avoid her domain. The path led through terrifying places. First, she passed through whirling whirlpools that dragged everything that came near into their funnels. Then, she had to swim through a slimy swamp where giant polyps, half animal, half plant, waited. They stretched out their long, slippery arms, grabbing at everything that passed. The witch's dwelling was built from the white bones of drowned men. The witch herself sat in the middle of this gruesome house, feeding a toad from her own mouth. She was hideous, but the Little Mermaid, overcoming her fear, swam up to her and told her of her desire. "It is foolish, very foolish," the witch hissed, "but your wish shall be granted, since you desire it so. I will brew you a magic potion. When you drink it on the shore, your fish's tail will split and transform into a pair of lovely legs. But listen carefully to the price. It will be unbearably painful, as if a sharp sword were piercing you. And after that, every step you take on land will feel as if you are walking on sharp knives, so that your delicate feet will bleed. Can you endure that?" "Yes," whispered the Little Mermaid. "Good," the witch continued. "But remember, once you become human, you can never again return to the sea, to your sisters and your father. And that is not all. For my potion, you must give me the most precious thing you possess, your voice. You have the most beautiful voice in all the ocean, and I will take it for myself. I must cut out your beautiful tongue as payment." The Little Mermaid turned pale with horror, but nodded in agreement. "And one last thing," the witch added, her eyes gleaming maliciously. "If the prince loves you so much that he marries you, you will receive an immortal soul. But if his heart is given to another, then at the dawn of the first day after his wedding, your heart will break from sorrow, and you will dissolve into the waves, becoming sea foam." Mute and full of resolve, the Little Mermaid took the cup with the burning potion and swam toward the shore, to the prince's palace. She sat on the steps leading to the water and looked one last time at her home in the depths. Then she drank the potion. A sharp, unbearable pain shot through her entire body, and she lost consciousness. Chapter 4: A Dance on Knives. When she awoke, the sun was already high. Leaning over her was the handsome prince. He asked who she was and how she had come there, but she could not answer. She could only look at him with her deep blue eyes, full of a silent plea. He noticed that instead of a tail, she now had 2 slender legs, and taking her by the hand, he led her into the palace. Every step was torture. The sharp knives the witch had spoken of pierced her feet, but she walked so lightly and gracefully, as if she were gliding on air. Everyone in the palace admired her beauty and elegance. She was given magnificent clothes of silk and muslin, and she became the most beautiful lady at court. But she was mute. She could neither sing nor speak. The prince grew to love her, but it was the love one has for a sweet, devoted child. He was enchanted by her beauty and her silent mystery. He allowed her to sleep on a velvet cushion at the door of his chambers. He called her his little foundling and loved more than anything to watch her dance. And so she danced for him. She danced as no one else could. She glided across the hall, enduring infernal pain. With every movement, every pirouette, it felt as if her feet were being cut to pieces. She smiled at the prince while her heart bled with suffering and the inability to tell him the truth. No one knew the price she paid for every moment spent by his side. At night, when everyone in the palace was asleep, she would secretly go down to the sea. She would step into the cold water, and it would soothe the burning pain in her feet a little. There, on the shore, she would think of her lost home and see her sisters, who would swim up, full of sorrow. They sang of how they missed her, and she would wave back at them, but she could not utter a single word. Her loneliness in this loud, bright world of humans was absolute. Chapter 5: The Prince's Bride. The prince became more and more attached to his mute beauty. He confided his most secret thoughts to her. "I will never love anyone but one maiden," he told her one day as they sat in the garden. "The one who saved my life after the shipwreck. I saw her only for a moment when I awoke on the shore by the temple. My parents insist that I travel to the neighboring kingdom to meet the princess, but I do not want to. But if I am to marry anyone, it will be my savior. You look so much like her that sometimes I think you could take her place in my heart." The Little Mermaid listened, and her heart both ached with pain and fluttered with hope. For it was she who had saved him. If only she could tell him. Soon, it was decided that the prince must visit the neighboring kingdom after all. "I must go," he told the Little Mermaid, But I will not marry her against my will. I will go simply to see her. I will take you with me, for you cannot stay here alone." They set off on their journey in a magnificent ship. The Little Mermaid stood on the deck, looking at the blue water and thinking of how much she had left behind there in the deep. When their ship arrived in the capital of the neighboring kingdom, they were greeted with honors. The princess came out of the palace, and the Little Mermaid, seeing her, froze. It was the very same young woman from the temple, the one the prince mistakenly believed to be his savior. "It is you!" the prince exclaimed upon seeing her. "It was you who saved me when I lay lifeless on the shore. Oh, I am so happy. My boldest dream has come true." He embraced his bride and turned to the Little Mermaid with a happy smile. "Are you happy for me too, my little foundling? I am happier than I ever dared to hope." For the Little Mermaid, the world collapsed. She felt an icy coldness seize her from within. She knew what this meant. Tomorrow would be the wedding, and at the dawn of the next day, her heart would break, and she would become foam upon the sea waves. The wedding was celebrated with incredible splendor. Bells rang, and heralds walked the streets distributing treats. The Little Mermaid stood beside the bride, holding her long train. She smiled, though she felt nothing but emptiness. She knew this was the last night she would see the prince for whom she had sacrificed everything. Chapter 6. The Dagger and the Sister's Hair. The celebration continued on the ship, which was to take the newlyweds home. Music, laughter, and dancing did not cease until late into the night. The prince and his bride were at the height of their happiness. The Little Mermaid danced. She danced as she had never danced before, pouring all her pain, all her love, and all her despair into the dance. She flew across the deck, and everyone watched her with admiration, not knowing that this was her farewell dance. Her feet burned like fire, but she no longer felt the physical pain. It was completely consumed by the pain in her heart. When at last all was quiet, and the prince and his young wife had retired to their tent, the Little Mermaid went out onto the deck. She leaned against the railing and looked at the dark water, waiting for the first rays of sun that would bring her death. Suddenly, she saw familiar silhouettes in the water. It was her sisters. They were pale, and their beautiful long hair, which they had been so proud of, was cut short. "We are here to save you," they whispered in one voice. "We gave our hair to the sea witch. In return, she gave us this dagger. See how sharp it is? Take it before the sun rises. Go into the prince's tent, find his sleeping heart, and plunge the blade into it. When his warm blood splashes onto your feet, they will merge back into a fish's tail, and you will become a mermaid once more. You can return to us and live out your 300 years. Hurry, it is either him or you." With these words, they handed her the gleaming dagger and, with a deep sigh, disappeared into the waves. Chapter 7. Dawn and the Sea Foam. The Little Mermaid held the cold dagger in her hand. Her hand trembled. She slowly approached the tent where the newlyweds slept and gently drew back the heavy purple curtain. The princess slept with her head resting on the prince's chest, and he was so handsome. In his sleep, he whispered his young wife's name. He was happy. His life was full of love and joy, and her life was coming to an end. She looked at his face, which she loved more than anything in the world. She remembered the day she had saved him from the raging waves. She remembered his kind smile when he had found her on the shore. She raised the dagger over his heart. Just one strike, and she would be saved. She would return home, to her quiet garden, to her family. But her hand did not fall. No, she could not do it. She could not kill the one for whom she had sacrificed her voice and her home, for whom she had endured agonizing pain with every step. His happiness was more precious to her than her own life. With a final look, full of boundless love and forgiveness, she turned away. She went to the edge of the deck and threw the dagger as far as she could into the sea. The waves turned red where it fell, as if drops of blood had risen to the surface. In the east, the sky was already beginning to lighten. The first rays of the sun painted the clouds pink. The little mermaid cast a final glance at the prince, and then she stepped off the rail. She fell into the water and felt her body slowly and painlessly dissolving, turning into 1,000 bubbles of sea foam. But she did not feel the coldness of oblivion. She did not disappear. The sun rose over the sea, and its warm rays warmed her. She felt herself rising upward. Around her, she saw hundreds of beautiful, transparent, luminous beings. They were so light that they floated in the air. They were the daughters of the air. "Who are you?" she asked, and her own voice, beautiful and melodious, sounded for the first time in a long while. It was like the music of the stars. "We are the daughters of the air," they answered. "Like mermaids, we have no immortal soul, and we cannot obtain one on our own. But we can earn one through good deeds. You, poor child, strove for a soul with all your heart. You suffered and endured your trials, and you proved the strength of your sacrificial love. That love has raised you from your element and brought you to us. Now you have become one of us. For 300 years, we will fly about the world doing good, and when that time is over, we will gain an immortal soul." Invisible to human eyes, the little mermaid floated toward the ship. She kissed the brow of the beautiful bride, smiled at the prince who was searching for her on the deck, and together with the other daughters of the air, she rose up to the pink clouds drifting across the sky. And so ended the story of the Little Mermaid, whose love proved stronger than death and gave her the hope of eternity.